Just remember, Emma, you were skiing, my mother whispered, ripping my hospital bed rail. One wrong turn, that's all it was. Her knuckles were white, matching the sterile walls of my pre-op room. My father stood by the window, his face hard as stone, while my brother Marcus paced nervously in the corner. The pain in my side was excruciating, but it wasn't from any skiing accident. Less than 6 hours ago, Marcus had pushed me down our basement stairs during one of his infamous rage episodes. The difference this time? I landed badly, my internal injuries severe enough to require emergency surgery. Mom, the doctors will know. I managed through gritted teeth. The injuries don't match. They'll match if you say they match. My father cut in sharply. Your brother is 3 months away from starting his residency at Johns Hopkins. We're not letting one little accident ruin his medical career. Little accident, that's what they always called Marcus's outbursts. When he broke my wrist in 8th grade, it was a playful sibling roughhouse. When he pushed me into our glass coffee table last year, leaving me with 20 stitches, it was a momentary loss of balance. I was always expected to lie, to protect, to keep our family's perfect image intact. Marcus was the golden child, the future doctor, the one who could do no wrong. I was just the younger sister who needed to understand that family came first. A young nurse entered, checking my vitals. Dr. Chen will be in shortly to discuss the procedure, she said, her eyes lingering on my face. I saw something in her expression. Concern, maybe recognition. This wasn't her first time seeing injuries that didn't quite match the story. As soon as she left, Marcus approached my bed. Emma, please, his voice cracked, showing real fear for the first time. I didn't mean to. You know how I get sometimes. I'm getting help, seeing that therapist Dad found. Just, please. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. At 26, he was everything my parents had dreamed of. Tall, handsome, brilliant, with a bright future in medicine ahead of him. But I also saw the darkness that lurked beneath, the uncontrolled anger that had made me its target for years. The door opened again, and Dr. Chen walked in, her face serious as she reviewed my chart. Miss Sullivan, I'm concerned about the nature of your injuries. They're inconsistent with a skiing accident. My mother stepped forward smoothly. Emma's always been clumsy, doctor. She hit several trees on her way down. It was quite the tumble. Dr. Chen's eyes met mine, and I saw something there, understanding, compassion, and determination. I'd like to speak with Emma alone for a moment, please. Absolutely not. My father started, but Dr. Chen cut him off. It's hospital policy in cases like this. Please wait outside. I watched my family file out, each face wearing a different mask of worry. As the door closed, Dr. Chen pulled up a chair beside my bed. Emma, I'm going to be direct with you. Your injuries indicate a fall from height, with impact patterns suggesting stairs, not a skiing slope. Additionally, your medical history shows multiple emergency room visits over the past decade, all with various explanations that don't quite add up. My heart raced. This was different from the other times. Usually, our family doctor handled everything, maintaining our secrets with quiet efficiency. But he was out of town, and my injuries were too severe to wait. I can't. I started, but Dr. Chen held up her hand. Before you continue that skiing story, you should know that hospital security cameras caught your arrival. Your brother carried you in, and we have footage of him admitting to the ER nurse that you fell down the stairs at home. My breath caught. Marcus's panic when we arrived must have made him forget the practiced lies, just for a moment. One slip, after years of careful cover-ups. The surgery you need is serious, Emma. You have internal bleeding that needs to be addressed immediately. But I'm also mandated to report suspected abuse. Your brother's medical career isn't worth your life. Tears filled my eyes. For the first time, someone was seeing through the carefully constructed facade my family had built. Someone was putting my safety first. If I tell the truth, I whispered, they'll never forgive me. Dr. Chen took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop protecting those who hurt us. Your brother needs help. Real help, not cover-ups. And you need to be safe. As the anesthesia team began preparing for my surgery, I made a decision that would change everything. I told Dr. Chen the truth, all of it. Years of documented injuries suddenly had real explanations. Years of silence finally found a voice. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia took hold was Dr. Chen making a phone call. Her words clear and purposeful. I need to report a case of suspected domestic abuse, and I need to contact the medical board. The week after my surgery passed in a blur of pain medication, hushed arguments outside my hospital room, and a parade of unfamiliar faces asking questions. My parents tried to maintain control, but things were different now. Hospital security stood outside my door, and visitors had to be approved, a precaution Dr. Chen had insisted on after my mother's third attempt to correct my statement. Marcus wasn't allowed in the hospital at all. A restraining order had been issued, something that sent my father into a rage. "Your own brother," he shouted before security escorted him out. "How could you do this to your own brother?" But it was the quieter moments that really showed me how much had changed. Social workers came, showing me patterns I'd been trained not to see. They laid out photos of my previous injuries, medical reports spanning years, creating a timeline of abuse that made me feel sick to my stomach. "Your brother's residency program has been notified," Linda, my assigned victim advocate, told me one afternoon. She was a gentle woman with kind eyes who brought me crossword puzzles and sat with me when the anxiety got too bad. "The medical board is launching a full investigation." Will they revoke his acceptance?" I asked, surprised to find I still cared. "That's not your concern, Emma," Linda said firmly. "Your job right now is to focus on healing and accepting that none of this was your fault." My phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from extended family. Aunt Sarah, who'd always turned a blind eye to Marcus's temper, now demanded I stop this nonsense and think about the family's reputation. Uncle Pete, a hospital administrator in Boston, offered to smooth things over if I would just recant my statement. But there was one message that hit differently. It came from my cousin Kate, who I hadn't seen since she moved across the country 3 years ago. I always knew something was wrong, but they made me feel crazy for worrying. "I'm so sorry I didn't help you then. You're the bravest person I know." Dr. Chen visited regularly, checking my recovery and offering quiet encouragement. "The medical board investigator contacted me today," she said during one visit. "They're particularly interested in how your family's doctor handled previous incidents." I thought about Dr. Harrison, our family physician who had treated me since childhood. How many times had he written vague descriptions in my chart, accepting the flimsy explanations my parents provided? How many opportunities to help me had he ignored? The investigation was expanding beyond Marcus now, reaching into years of institutional failure. Each new revelation seemed to shock everyone except me. I'd lived it after all. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Morris, the chief of surgery, came to my room. He looked uncomfortable, clearing his throat several times before speaking. "Miss Sullivan, I owe you an apology," he began. 10 months ago, you came to our ER with a concussion. I was the attending physician and I accepted your family's explanation without questioning it. I failed you. I remembered that night. Marcus had thrown a textbook at my head during a study session. The cover story had been that I'd walked into a door while texting. "It's not your fault," I said automatically, then caught myself. Linda had been working with me on this, my instinct to comfort others, to take responsibility for their failings. "It is partly," Dr. Morris insisted. "We're supposed to be advocates for our patients. The medical board's investigation is making us look hard at how we handle cases like yours. Changes are being made." That night, alone in my hospital room, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Pictures of family vacations, holiday gatherings, Marcus's medical school graduation, all of them showing smiling faces and perfect poses. Each image held a hidden story now, a memory of what happened just before or after the camera clicked. There was Marcus at Christmas, grinning with his arm around me, hours after he'd slammed my fingers in the car door for embarrassing him in front of his girlfriend. There was Mom straightening my collar at Easter, whispering that if I'd just try harder not to upset my brother, these things wouldn't happen. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was the night nurse, coming to check my vitals. "Your mother's downstairs again," she mentioned casually. Security turned her away. What did she want? "Same as yesterday, trying to bring you papers to sign. Something about withdrawing your statement." I closed my eyes, exhausted by the constant pressure. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't facing it alone. The hospital staff, the social workers, Dr. Chen, They had created a protective barrier between me and my family's manipulation. The medical board investigator is coming tomorrow, the nurse added, adjusting my IV. Dr. Chen wanted you to have time to prepare. I nodded, touching the still tender surgical scar on my side. This wound would heal cleanly, properly, under the care of people who actually wanted to help me recover. Unlike all the others that had been hidden, minimized, and swept under the rug of family loyalty, tomorrow would bring more questions, more revelations, more attempts by my family to regain control. But tonight, in this quiet room with its security guard outside and its caring staff checking on me, I felt something unfamiliar growing stronger. Safety. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt safe. 6 months after my surgery, I sat in a conference room at the state medical board, sharing my story one final time. The investigation had grown far beyond Marcus, exposing a pattern of institutional negligence that spanned multiple hospitals and medical practices. Dr. Harrison, our family physician, had his license suspended. 3 other doctors who had treated me over the years faced disciplinary action for failing to report obvious signs of abuse. But the biggest shock came from Marcus's medical school records. There were incidents during his clinical rotations, the board investigator explained, laying out documents. Aggressive behavior toward nurses, inappropriate reactions to stress, complaints from patients' families. All quietly handled, all buried under glowing recommendations from supervisors who knew your family. I wasn't surprised. Marcus had always been protected, his outbursts excused, his path smoothed by our parents' influence and money. But now, sitting in this sterile conference room, I watched that carefully constructed shield crumble. The medical board's decision was unanimous. Marcus' residency acceptance was revoked, and he was barred from practicing medicine in our state. More significantly, the report would follow him anywhere he tried to restart his medical career. My parents hadn't spoken to me since I refused to recant my statement. Instead, they'd thrown their energy into damage control, hiring expensive lawyers and PR firms to manage the fallout. But some things couldn't be managed away. Your testimony helped identify 7 other cases of covered-up medical abuse, Linda told me after the hearing. 7 other families who finally have answers about suspicious injuries and incomplete records. I thought about those 7 others, wondering if they too had been told that family loyalty meant silence, that protecting someone else's future was worth sacrificing their own safety. My new apartment overlooked a small park, as different from our family's sprawling estate as possible. Kate had helped me find it, insisting on paying the security deposit despite my protests. Consider it back payment for all the times I should have helped, she'd said. The morning after the medical board's decision, I was surprised to find Aunt Sarah at my door. She looked older, tired, nothing like the polished society woman who had once told me to stop being so sensitive about Marcus's behavior. I've been going through old photos, she said, holding out a worn album. Looking for signs, for moments when I should have seen what was happening. They're everywhere, aren't they? Once you know what to look for. We sat on my small couch, flipping through pages of family history. There I was at 10, wearing long sleeves in summer to hide bruises. Marcus at 16, his face contorted with rage in the background of a birthday party photo while everyone smiled for the camera. Your mother called yesterday, Aunt Sarah said quietly. She wanted me to talk to you about dropping the whole thing. Said it wasn't too late to fix this, to get Marcus back into medicine. And what did you say? I told her I was done fixing things that shouldn't be fixed. The changes rippled outward. Uncle Pete resigned from his hospital administration position after internal investigations revealed his role in concealing similar cases. 2 of Marcus's former supervisors lost their positions for failing to report his concerning behavior during rotations. Dr. Chen kept in touch, becoming something of a mentor as I started taking psychology classes at the local college. Sometimes, she told me over coffee, it takes one person standing up to show others they can stand too. Marcus himself had moved across the country, last I heard. He was working in pharmaceutical sales, ironically the career path our parents had once dismissed as beneath him. The restraining order remained in effect, but sometimes I wondered if he found the help he really needed, now that his facade of perfection had been stripped away. My mother's last attempt at contact came in the form of a letter, delivered by her lawyer. It was filled with the usual manipulation, family obligation, the importance of forgiveness, the suggestion that I was being selfish and dramatic. At the bottom, she'd written, "Everything we did was to protect this family." I wrote back one line, "Everything I did was to protect myself." The nightmares still came sometimes, memories of falls and impacts and the sound of my brother's anger. But now I had tools to handle them. Therapy, medication when needed, and a support system built on truth rather than secrets. 1 year to the day after my emergency surgery, I returned to the hospital. Not as a patient, but as a volunteer with a new program Dr. Chen had started, helping identify and support victims of family violence. Standing in the ER where I'd once been carried and bleeding, where one doctor's refusal to accept lies had changed everything, I felt the weight of what had been lost and what had been gained. My family's perfect image was shattered, but in its place was something real. My brother's medical career was over, but maybe that had saved future patients from someone who should never have had power over others' well-being. My parents' influence had crumbled, but I was standing straight and strong. Sometimes protection means breaking what was never whole to begin with. Sometimes healing hurts more than the original wound. But as I pinned on my volunteer badge, ready to help others find their voice, I knew that every painful step had been worth it. The truth had cost me a family, but it had given me myself. The pot roast was perfectly cooked, just like every Sunday dinner for the past 25 years. My mother, Diana, sat at the head of the table, meticulously arranging her napkin while my father, James, carved the meat with practiced precision. My younger sister, Emma, texted under the table, barely concealing her phone behind her designer purse. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. But I could feel it, the tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. "Sophie," my mother's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. "I noticed you're still working at that little bookstore." I nodded, taking a small bite of potato. "Yes, I am." "When are you going to get a real job?" Emma just got promoted to senior manager at her firm. The comparison was nothing new. Emma, the biological daughter, the golden child, could do no wrong. "I like my job, Mom," I replied quietly, "and I'm actually." "Like your job?" She set down her fork with a clang. "You're 28, living in a tiny apartment, working at a bookstore. Do you know how embarrassing it is when my friends ask about you?" My father studied his plate intently, while Emma's thumbs continued their rapid dance across her phone screen. Neither of them would meet my eyes. "Mom, please," I started, but she wasn't finished. "I've tried so hard with you, Sophie. God knows I've tried. When we adopted you, I thought—" She shook her head. "I thought I could love you like my own." The room went silent. Even Emma's fingers stilled over her phone. "What did you say?" My voice was barely a whisper. My mother stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You heard me. I'm tired of pretending. You're not my real daughter, and you never will be. I've spent 25 years trying to mold you into something acceptable. But you're just not." I felt the words hit me like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached for my bag, the one I'd started bringing to these dinners 6 months ago, when I first discovered the truth about my family. "Sophie, sit down." My father finally spoke, his voice weak. "Your mother's just upset." "Upset?" My mother laughed, a harsh sound that held no warmth. "I'm beyond upset. I'm done. Done watching her waste her life. Done explaining to everyone why my daughter can't be more like her sister. Done pretending that this experiment in adoption was anything but a mistake." Emma finally looked up, her perfect features arranged in a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom, maybe you should." "No, Emma. It's time someone said it. Sophie, I want you out of this house. No more Sunday dinners, no more holidays, no more pretending we're one big happy family." I stood up slowly, my chair making no sound against the floor. My hands didn't shake as I picked up my bag. Years of preparation had led to this moment, though I hadn't expected it to come quite like this. "Nothing to say." My mother's voice dripped with disdain. "Typical. Even now, you can't show a hint of backbone." I looked at each of them in turn. My father, suddenly fascinated by his wedding ring. Emma, already returning to her phone. And finally my mother, standing there with 25 years of barely concealed resentment written across her face. "Thank you for dinner," I said softly, then turned and walked toward the door. "That's it," my mother called after me. "You're just going to leave. No drama, no tears." I paused at the doorway, my hand on the knob. What did you expect? I expected something. Anything. You're being kicked out of your family for God's sake. I smiled then, just slightly. No, Mom, I'm being kicked out of your family. There's a difference. With that, I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. As I got into my car, I could see them through the dining room window, my mother gesturing wildly, my father slumped in his chair, Emma finally looking up from her phone with something like worry on her face. They had no idea what I discovered 6 months ago when I accidentally found those old papers in the attic. No idea that I knew the truth about my adoption, not just the fact that I was adopted, which I always known, but the real story, the one they kept hidden for 25 years, the one that would change everything. As I drove away from the house I'd once called home, I felt lighter than I had in years. Let them think they'd thrown me away. Let them think they'd finally broken me. In 6 months, when everything was ready, they'd learned just how wrong they were. 6 months earlier, I'd been helping my father clean the attic when I found the metal box tucked behind old party decorations. He'd stepped out to take a call, and something about the way the box was hidden caught my attention. Inside, beneath yellowed newspapers and faded photographs, I found documents that changed everything. My adoption papers weren't from the agency my parents had always mentioned. Instead, they were connected to one of the wealthiest families in the country, the Andersons. More specifically, I was Catherine Anderson's daughter. The same Catherine Anderson who disappeared from public life 28 years ago, only to return a year later, continuing her work as one of the most successful businesswomen in the country. The same Catherine Anderson who'd recently been in the news for her plans to step down as CEO of Anderson Technologies, with no clear successor in sight. I spent weeks digging deeper, carefully piecing together the truth. My biological mother hadn't given me up willingly. She'd been forced to by her father, who thought a scandal would ruin their family name. The Winters, my adoptive family, had been paid handsomely to take me and keep quiet. The money they'd received, they'd used it to start their successful business, the one Emma now helped run. The same business they'd never let me be part of, always claiming I wasn't qualified enough. My entire life had been built on their lies. After discovering the truth, I reached out to Catherine Anderson through a private investigator. The meeting was arranged in secret, at a small cafe 3 hours from my hometown. "I've been looking for you," were her first words to me. She had the same dark hair as mine, the same green eyes. "For 25 years, I've been searching." She told me everything. How her father had forced her to give me up, how she tried to find me once she took over the company, how the adoption records had been sealed and hidden. "I'm stepping down as CEO soon," she said, holding my hand across the table. "I've built this company into something extraordinary, but I never wanted it for myself. I wanted it for you." Over the next few months, I worked with Catherine in secret. She arranged for me to take business courses online, taught me everything about the company, prepared me for what was to come. All while I continued working at my little bookstore, which was actually a successful chain of independent bookstores I'd built myself, using the knowledge I'd gained from watching my adoptive parents run their business. I kept it quiet, using a different name, letting them think I was just a simple employee. The irony wasn't lost on me. The night of that final family dinner, after my mother's cruel words, I drove straight to Catherine's penthouse. "They finally did it," I said, sitting on her luxurious couch. "They threw me out." Catherine's face hardened. "Are you okay?" I nodded, feeling strangely calm. "I am. For the first time, I really am." She smiled, pulling out a folder filled with documents. "Then I think it's time. The board meeting is next week. Are you ready?" "I've been ready my whole life," I replied. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages from Emma. "Mom's freaking out," she wrote. She didn't mean what she said. "Come home." I didn't respond. My father called next. "Princess, your mother was just upset. We can work this out." I let it go to voicemail. Even my mother tried, her message stiff and formal. "Sophie, you're being childish. We need to discuss this like adults." Like adults, as if she hadn't just thrown away 25 years of supposed motherhood in a single dinner. Instead of responding, I focused on the final preparations with Catherine. We reviewed company reports, went over the presentation for the board, fine-tuned every detail of the announcement. "They won't know what hit them," Catherine said, pride evident in her voice. A week after that disastrous dinner, as my adoptive family continued their barrage of messages and calls, the business world was rocked by breaking news. Catherine Anderson announces successor for Anderson Technologies. Long-lost daughter returns to take the helm. My phone rang again. This time, it was Emma. "Sophie," she gasped. You're on the news. You're Catherine Anderson's daughter? How is this possible?" I smiled, looking out the window of my new office on the top floor of Anderson Technologies. "You should ask Mom and Dad," I replied calmly. "They can explain exactly how possible it is." The line went silent for a moment. They knew. All this time they knew. "Ask them about the money they received 25 years ago," I said. "Ask them what they did with it. Ask them why they really never let me join the family business." I hung up, turning back to my desk where Catherine, my real mother, stood with a proud smile. "Ready for the press conference?" she asked. I stood smoothing down my designer suit. More than ready. It was time to show my adoptive family exactly what their disappointing daughter could do. The press conference was a whirlwind of camera flashes and rapid-fire questions. I stood at the podium, Catherine beside me, as we shared our story with the world. Well, parts of it anyway. "Miss Anderson, how does it feel to discover your true heritage? What are your plans for the company? Were you surprised to learn about your biological mother?" I answered each question with the poise Catherine had helped me perfect over the last 6 months. No one needed to know about the tears, the anger, or the years of feeling like I wasn't enough. This wasn't about revenge. It was about claiming what was rightfully mine. The real show began when my adoptive parents arrived at Anderson Technologies the next day, demanding to see me. Security called up, and I instructed them to let the Winters through. It was time to finish this. They burst into my office, looking completely out of place among the modern decor and floor-to-ceiling windows. My mother's perfect makeup couldn't hide her panic, and my father's usual confidence had vanished. "Sophie," my mother started, then corrected herself. "Catherine Jr., we can explain." I leaned back in my chair, taking in their desperate expressions. "Explain what? How you took money to hide me from my real mother, or how you used that money to start your business while treating me like a burden?" "We gave you everything," my father protested weakly. "A home, an education." "The bare minimum," I cut in. "While Emma got the best of everything. Private school, expensive cars, a guaranteed position in the family business. Tell me how much of her privilege was bought with the money you received for taking me." They exchanged guilty looks, and I knew I hit the mark. "Where's Emma?" I asked, noting my sister's absence. She's not speaking to us," my mother admitted. "After she learned the truth, I couldn't help but laugh. Your perfect daughter finally saw you for who you really are." "We did what we thought was best," my father insisted. "We needed that money, and you needed a home." "No," I stood up, placing my hands on the desk. "What I needed was the truth. What I needed was parents who didn't make me feel like I was never enough. What I needed was a family who loved me for who I was, not what they could get from hiding me." My mother stepped forward, reaching out. "We did love you, Sophie. We still do. Please, we can't lose everything we've built." And there it was. Not "we can't lose you," or "we're sorry for what we did." They were worried about their business, their reputation, their standing in society. "You won't lose everything," I said, pulling out a folder. "I'm not like you. Inside this folder is a contract. Anderson Technologies is acquiring your company at a very generous price. You'll retain your positions, under new management, of course. Emma, too, if she wants to stay." They stared at the documents in shock. "Why?" my father asked. "After everything we did." "Because 25 years ago, you taught me my first business lesson. Everything has a price. Consider this me paying you back for all those years of raising me. We're even now." Catherine chose that moment to enter the office. My mother physically recoiled at the sight of her. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters," Catherine's voice was ice cold. "I trust to find the terms of the acquisition fair, though it's more than you deserve after what you did. We'll sue," my mother threatened weakly. "We'll tell everyone how you abandoned your daughter." "No, you won't," I said calmly, "because that story makes you look far worse than it does us. Sign the contract, keep your positions, and we'll all move forward professionally. Or don't, and watch everything you built with that blood money crumble." They signed. As they left my office, my mother turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not for what we did, but for what I said at dinner. You were always more capable than we gave you credit for. I nodded but said nothing. Her words meant little now. After they left, Catherine put her arm around me. Are you okay? I am, I replied, surprising myself by how true it felt. They don't have the power to hurt me anymore. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Emma. Inside was a photo of us as children, playing in the backyard. I didn't know what she wrote. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel less than. For what it's worth, you were always the better daughter. The better person. I'd like a chance to know my real sister if you'll let me. I placed the photo on my desk, next to one of Catherine and me at the press conference, the past and present side by side. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. Dinner tonight? Just us. I smiled, typing back a quick yes. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you end up with. Sometimes the path to finding yourself means losing everything you thought you were. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well on your own terms. I had finally found my place, my purpose, and my real family. And that was worth more than any revenge would ever be. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead as I clutched my throbbing shoulder. My Aunt Karen's shrill voice carried through the waiting room. Tommy's just being dramatic again. You know how Michael likes to roughhouse with the kids. I'm Tommy Mitchell, 23, and this was the 12th time my uncle had accidentally hurt me. Only this time, something was different. The nurse looking at my chart wasn't nodding along with my family's excuses. 4th shoulder dislocation in 3 years, Nurse Santos muttered, her dark eyes narrowing as she scrolled through my medical history. Always during family gatherings, always involving the same uncle. My mother shifted uncomfortably beside me. Boys will be boys, she said with that nervous laugh I'd grown to hate. Michael just doesn't know his own strength sometimes. The pain shot through my shoulder as I remembered how it happened. Another mandatory Sunday family dinner, another round of Uncle Michael's wrestling practice. I had tried to decline, but he grabbed me anyway, twisting my arm behind my back while everyone watched and laughed. Come on, Tommy boy. Show your old uncle what you've got. He had taunted, knowing full well I couldn't break his grip. The sickening pop of my shoulder echoed through the dining room, followed by my scream. Mr. Mitchell. Nurse Santos addressed me directly, ignoring my mother's attempts to interject. Would you like to speak with me privately? Before anyone could object, she pulled the privacy curtain around my bed, creating a barrier between me and my family's watchful eyes. Listen carefully, she said softly, pretending to examine my shoulder. I've been an ER nurse for 15 years. This isn't rawhousing. It's systematic abuse. Your medical history shows a pattern that started when you were 8 years old. My throat tightened. Nobody had ever called it what it was before. The first record is a broken wrist, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Then multiple sprains, bruised ribs, another dislocated shoulder. Always explained away as sports injuries or accidents, but always happening when your uncle was present. Tears stung my eyes as years of suppressed memories surfaced. Uncle Michael, Dad's older brother, the family's golden boy. Successful businessman, generous donor to local charities, beloved by everyone, except the kids he played with. I'm not the only one, am I? I asked, finally voicing the suspicion I carried for years. Nurse Santos shook her head. Your cousin Danny was in here last month. Similar injuries, similar excuses. He's only 13. My stomach churned. Danny, my Aunt Patricia's son, had started avoiding family gatherings recently, just like I had at his age. We need to stop him, I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. But my family, they'll never believe. They don't have to, she interrupted, pulling out her phone. We have something they can't ignore. Documentation. Years of medical records showing a clear pattern. And now this. She played a video from the hospital's security camera showing my arrival. There was Uncle Michael gripping my injured arm, forcing me to walk faster. His face showed not concern, but anger. The mask of concern only appearing when hospital staff approached. Standard procedure for suspected abuse cases, she explained. We record everything, including his aggressive behavior in the parking lot. A knock on the curtain made me jump. Tommy? It was my cousin Sarah, Michael's daughter. Dad's getting impatient. He says to hurry up so we can all go home. Nurse Santos raised an eyebrow at me. In that moment, I thought of Danny, of all the other kids at our family gatherings who flinched when Uncle Michael came near. "I'd like to file a report," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "And I need to call Danny's parents." The nurse nodded, already reaching for the hospital phone. "I'll contact our patient advocate and the police. You won't have to do this alone." Outside the curtain, I could hear Uncle Michael's booming voice. "This is ridiculous. We're family. Tommy, stop wasting everyone's time." But for the first time, his voice didn't fill me with fear. Instead, I felt something new: determination. The curtain that separated us was thin, but it represented something powerful. A boundary, a shield, a line he couldn't cross anymore. Nurse Santos placed a reassuring hand on my good shoulder. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth, even when our family doesn't want to hear it." As she made the calls that would change everything, I closed my eyes and thought of Danny. "Hang on, kid," I whispered. "Help is finally coming." The next few hours would shatter our family's carefully maintained facade, but sometimes things need to break before they can heal properly, just like a dislocated shoulder. The hospital room became a storm center of activity. Detective Rivera arrived within 30 minutes, her presence sending Uncle Michael into a rage that only confirmed everyone's suspicions. "This is absurd," he shouted, pacing the waiting room. "We're talking about family roughhousing. Since when is that a crime?" But his protests were drowned out by the arrival of Aunt Patricia with Danny. The moment my young cousin saw me in the hospital bed, something broke inside him. He burst into tears and ran to Nurse Santos, clinging to her like a lifeline. "Danny, what are you doing?" Aunt Patricia looked bewildered, but I could see the dawning realization in her eyes as her son refused to let go of the nurse. "Mrs. Cooper," Detective Rivera addressed Danny's mother, "your son's medical records show 17 emergency room visits in the past 2 years, all coinciding with family gatherings where your brother-in-law was present." The color drained from Aunt Patricia's face. She stumbled into a chair, looking at Danny as if seeing him for the first time. "But Michael said, he told me Danny was just accident-prone." "Show her," I said to Nurse Santos. "Show her the pattern." The nurse pulled up both our medical histories on her tablet. 2 timelines, running parallel, showing the same story. Injuries, excuses, more injuries. Always when Uncle Michael was around, always explained away as accidents or rough play. "Oh God," Aunt Patricia whispered, reaching for her son. "Danny, baby, why didn't you tell me?" "He said you wouldn't believe me," Danny sobbed. "He said nobody would believe me because he's Uncle Michael and everyone loves Uncle Michael." The detective's notepad filled with statements. More family members arrived, drawn by urgent phone calls and text messages. Uncle Michael's wife, Aunt Susan, stood frozen in the corner, her face a mask of denial even as the evidence mounted. My mother tried to approach me, but Nurse Santos blocked her path. "Your son needs space right now," she said firmly. "And you need to decide whose side you're really on." Sarah, Michael's daughter, slipped into the room during the chaos. She was 19, and I suddenly remembered how she'd stopped bringing friends to family gatherings years ago. "Tommy," she said quietly, "I need to tell them about the lake house." My heart stopped. The lake house, Uncle Michael's pride and joy, where he took the kids for special bonding weekends. Detective Rivera's head snapped up. "What about the lake house?" Sarah's voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "There are others. Kids from the church, from his business partners' families. He'd invite them for weekends, say he was mentoring them." The room fell silent. Uncle Michael lunged forward, but 2 police officers who had arrived earlier caught him. "Sarah, shut your mouth," he snarled, showing his true face at last. "No, Dad," she replied, straightening her spine. "I'm done being quiet." Detective Rivera quickly called for additional units and a search warrant for the lake house. Uncle Michael was handcuffed and led away, screaming about family loyalty and ungrateful children. Aunt Susan finally broke her silence, not to defend her husband, but to collapse into tears. "I should have known," she kept repeating. "I should have seen it." Danny had calmed down enough to give a statement, holding tightly to his mother's hand. Aunt Patricia looked shell-shocked but determined, already talking to Detective Rivera about pressing charges. Sarah sat beside my hospital bed, both of us watching the family we knew crumble and a new truth emerge. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." Nurse Santos brought us all water and arranged for a crisis counselor to come speak with the family. She'd stayed past her shift, refusing to leave until she knew we were all safe. "You've probably heard this before," she told me, checking my shoulder one last time, "but this isn't your fault." None of it was your fault. Looking around the room at my cousins, at the mothers finally facing the truth, at the police officers taking statements and collecting evidence, I felt something shift inside me. The shame and fear that had lived in my chest for so long began to dissolve. Detective Rivera approached with some final questions. "The Lake House investigation will be extensive," she warned. "We'll need all of you to be strong a little longer." Sarah squeezed my hand. "We're stronger together," she said. "No more secrets." Through the hospital window, I could see Uncle Michael being placed in a police car. The family's golden boy, finally revealed for what he really was. It hadn't taken much, just one nurse who refused to look away, one medical history that told the true story, and one moment of courage that sparked a chain reaction of truth. Danny came over and carefully hugged me with one arm, mindful of my injured shoulder. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked. Looking at the strength gathering in that hospital room, the protective fury of awakened mothers, the professional dedication of Nurse Santos and Detective Rivera, the unshakable bond forming between the cousins who had survived, I knew the answer. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "We're going to be okay." 1 year later, I stood in the courthouse corridor, adjusting my tie with hands that no longer shook. The trial was finally ending, and Uncle Michael's plea deal would ensure he spent at least 20 years in prison. The investigation of the Lake House had revealed exactly what Sarah feared: dozens of victims spanning 15 years. "Ready?" Sarah appeared beside me, looking strong in her navy blazer. She'd become the family's backbone during this year, organizing support groups and helping Detective Rivera reach out to other victims. "As I'll ever be," I replied, rolling my shoulder, now fully healed thanks to proper physical therapy. "Is Danny here?" She nodded toward the bench where Danny sat with Aunt Patricia. At 14, he'd grown taller, but more importantly, he'd grown confident. The weekly therapy sessions and martial arts classes had helped him find his voice. "Tommy," he waved, showing off his new green belt. "Did you see? 5 more families came forward this morning." The news spread through our group like a ripple. More victims had found courage in our story. More parents had finally listened to their children. Uncle Michael's web of influence had unraveled completely. Nurse Santos, Maria, as she insisted we call her now, approached with her usual quiet strength. She testified as an expert witness, explaining how she'd identified the pattern of abuse in my medical records. Her testimony had inspired other healthcare workers to come forward with their own documented concerns about Uncle Michael. "The DA says it's a slam dunk," she informed us. "Between the medical records, the Lake House evidence, and all the witness testimonies, he's never getting out." My mother appeared at the courthouse entrance, hesitating before approaching our group. The past year had aged her, but also stripped away her denial. After months of therapy and painful self-reflection, she'd finally become the mother I needed. "I brought sandwiches," she said softly. "I thought, after the sentencing, we could have a picnic in the park, as a family." Sarah smiled warmly. "That sounds perfect, Aunt Linda." Our family had transformed. Aunt Susan, after divorcing Uncle Michael, had thrown herself into child advocacy work. Aunt Patricia started a support group for parents of abuse survivors. The weekly family dinners continued, but now they were genuine celebrations of healing and growth. "All rise," the bailiff's voice echoed from the courtroom. We filed in together, a united front. Uncle Michael sat at the defendant's table, diminished in his orange jumpsuit. He refused to look at us, but we stared straight at him, unafraid. The judge's sentencing was clear and firm: 25 years without possibility of parole, registration as a sex offender, and no contact with minors for life. As the gavel fell, I felt tears on my cheeks, not of pain or fear, but of relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered for statements. Sarah, now studying journalism with a focus on investigative reporting, handled them expertly. "This isn't just about our family," she told the cameras. "It's about breaking the silence that protects abusers. It's about believing children when they tell us they're hurting. Danny showed off his green belt to the reporters, proudly explaining how martial arts had helped him recover his confidence. Aunt Patricia beamed beside him, her protective arm around his shoulders. Maria joined us for the picnic, bringing her famous empanadas. As we spread blankets in the park, I marveled at how much had changed since that night in the emergency room. I got accepted to nursing school, I announced, unpacking the sandwiches. Starting next fall. The news was met with cheers and hugs. My mother wiped away tears. "You'll be amazing," Maria said. "You already know the most important part, how to listen and believe." Sarah shared her own news. Her investigative piece on family abuse cover-ups was being published in a major magazine. Danny proudly announced his role as peer counselor at his school's new abuse prevention program. As the afternoon sun warmed us, I watched my rebuilt family sharing food and hope. The wounds hadn't disappeared, but they'd healed into something stronger. We'd learned to protect each other, to speak up, to trust our voices. "Hey, Tommy," Danny called, tossing me his martial arts belt. "Want to learn some moves?" The good kind of moves. I copped the belt, remembering how different this was from Uncle Michael's wrestling. "Show me," I said, standing up. As Danny demonstrated proper stance and respect-based sparring, I saw our future unfolding. A future where family meant safety, where strength meant protection, where love didn't hurt. Maria watched us with satisfaction, probably remembering that night she'd pulled the curtain closed and helped me find my voice. One nurse, one moment of attention, one refusal to accept the usual excuses. It had sparked a revolution of truth in our family. "Sometimes," she said, sharing her empanadas, "healing others helps us heal ourselves." Looking around at my family, scared but stronger, wounded but wiser, I knew she was right. We had transformed our pain into purpose, our fear into force for change. The sun set on our picnic, but our story's light would keep spreading, helping others find their way out of darkness. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen, one voice willing to speak, one truth willing to be told.